The air inside the loading dock of Gleam Harbor tasted like recycled copper and 3-week-old anxiety. It was the specific metallic tang of a neutral zone that was not actually neutral, merely a pause button on a war that had been simmering for 60 years. Rowan Mercer tapped the side of his headset, grimacing, as a burst of static whined against his eardrum. He was the only human standing on the exchange deck, a lonely figure in a sea of Durasteel crates and armed alien soldiers. As the diplomatic engineer and lead translator for the Terran delegation, his job was theoretically simple: ensure the semantic integrity of the peace talks. In practice, his job was to stand in the middle of a room filled with people who wanted to shoot each other and make sure they did not do so because of a misplaced verb. He checked the chronometer on his wrist. The delegation from the Fenari High Fleet was late, 19 minutes late. In diplomatic terms, that was an insult. In military terms, it was a flanking maneuver. "Keep your heartbeat down, Mercer," the voice of Envoy Marakeen crackled in his ear. She was safe on the Terran cruiser, docked 2 kilometers away. "Telemetry shows your cortisol levels are rising by 5% every minute. You look like you are about to bolt." "I am not going to bolt," Rowan muttered, adjusting the collar of his flight suit. "I am just wondering if the atmospheric scrubbers in here are actually working, or if we are all just breathing each other's exhaust. It smells like a locker room for cyborgs in here." "Focus," Keen snapped. "The Rooklight has docked. Captain Sable Ardent is leading the exchange personally. Do not stare at her. The Fenari take eye contact as a challenge to duel." "I know the protocol, Mara. I wrote the manual on the protocol." The heavy blast doors at the far end of the hangar hissed open. Steam vented from the hydraulic seals, swirling in the low gravity. Through the mist, the Fenari delegation advanced. They were a striking species, bipedal and vaguely vulpine, possessing an elegance that made human movement look like stumbling. They were tall, covered in sleek, dense fur that ranged from snow-white to deep obsidian. Their ears were long and tapered, twitching independently to catch the hum of the station's power grid. But it was their armor that drew the eye-matte ceramic plates that interlocked, seamlessly designed to deflect energy blasts in intimate, terrifying discipline. At the front walked Captain Sable Ardent. Rowan had seen holographic files, but the reality was a different, visceral experience. She was imposing, standing nearly 7 feet tall in her boots. Her fur was a striking russet color, turning to black at the tips of her ears and tail. She moved with a fluid, predatory grace, her hand resting casually on the hilt of a shock baton at her hip. Her eyes were gold sharp enough to cut glass, and currently scanning the room for threats. Behind her, a squad of 6 guards marched in perfect unison, and behind them, floating on a grav sled, was the cargo, a crate of unstable, distinct matter isotopes, the price humanity was paying to keep the trade routes open for another 6 months. Rowan straightened his spine. He stepped forward to the designated marker, a yellow circle painted on the scarred deck plating. "Greetings," Rowan said. His throat felt like sandpaper. He waited for the universal translator around his neck, a chunky, temperamental box he had modified himself to spit out the Fenari clicks and hums. The machine chirped. Captain Sable stopped 10 feet away. She looked down at him. Her expression was unreadable, which was typical for a species that communicated as much with scent and ear position as with words. "The Terran engineer," Sable said. Her voice, filtered through his earpiece, was a low, resonant contralto that seemed to vibrate in his chest. "You look smaller than your file suggests. Fragile." Rowan forced a polite smile. "We focus on density, Captain. Compact efficiency." Sable's nose twitched. She stepped closer, invading his personal space. It was a power move designed to make him flinch. Rowan did not flinch. He had grown up with 3 older sisters and a mortgage. He was immune to intimidation, mostly because he was usually too tired to be afraid. "We have the isotopes," Rowan said, gesturing to the sled the humans had brought forward. 99% purity, as agreed. We expect the release of the navigational charts in return. Sable signaled to one of her guards a scarred male named Chief Rask, who moved to inspect the human cargo. The tension in the room ratcheted up. Every hand drifted toward a holster. The silence was heavy, filled only by the hum of the grav sleds and the distant thud of the station's stabilizers. Rowan exhaled slowly, trying to regulate his breathing. He watched Sable turn to issue a command to her subordinates. She pivoted sharply, her long coat flaring out, and for a split second the harsh, overhead lights caught the curve of her uniform. It was an impulsive, intrusive, and entirely human thought. It was the kind of thought that flashed through a brain deprived of sleep and social interaction for 3 months. Rowan thought, damn, that uniform fits well. Her butt actually looks cute. He did not mean to say it. He certainly did not mean to speak it into the high-gain microphone of a prototype translation device that was currently synced to the public address system of the entire hangar bay. But he was tired, and he muttered, "Cute butt." The translator, set to diplomatic high context mode, processed the input. It analyzed the syntax, the tone, and the biological subject. It referenced the Fenari cultural database for an equivalent concept of physical admiration regarding the posterior chain and its relevance to social standing. The speaker on Rowan's chest amplified his mutter into a series of sharp rhythmic barks and a low, resonant growl that echoed off the steel walls. The structural integrity of your reproductive chassis suggests a superior genetic lineage worthy of immediate and aggressive mating rituals. The silence that followed was not merely quiet. It was the absolute zero of sound. Every Fenari in the room froze. Their ears swiveled forward in unison. Chief Rask dropped the scanner he was holding. It clattered loudly on the deck, but no one looked at it. Captain Sable Ardent slowly turned back to face Rowan. Her golden eyes were wide, her pupils dilated to black discs. Her mouth hung slightly open, exposing the tips of very sharp, very white canines. Her tail, which had been swaying gently, was now rigid and puffed out to twice its normal size. Rowan felt the blood drain from his face, pooling somewhere in his boots. He tapped the translator box frantically. No, wait. Error. Syntax error. You. Sable's voice was a strangled hiss. The translation software, now helpfully providing context, whispered in Rowan's ear that he had just propositioned a high-ranking matriarch in front of her entire command staff, using a phrasing that was traditionally reserved for a challenge of dominance in a mating pit. "I did not mean that," Rowan stammered, his hands held up in surrender. "Translation glitch. Firmware update. I was commenting on the tailoring, the fabric. You challenged my lineage," Sable said, stepping forward. Her hand was gripping her shock baton, so tightly that the leather of her glove creaked. "You insulted my command by reducing me to a brooding vessel." "No," Rowan backed up, hitting the edge of the human cargo crate. "I just said you looked fit. Healthy, it was a compliment. A human compliment. We are weird. You know this." The guards raised their pulse rifles. The human security detail behind Rowan raised their kinetics. The air crackled with the premonition of violence. One twitch of a finger, and the peace treaty would be incinerated along with everyone in the room. "Captain," Chief Rask growled, stepping up beside Sable. "Permission to eliminate the insolent soft skin." Sable's chest heaved. She was furious, humiliated, but she was also a captain. She could not start a war because a human engineer had a glib tongue. But she also could not let it slide. The cultural imperative demanded a response. "Stand down, Rask," she snapped, though her eyes never left Rowan. "If I kill him now, the Alliance will claim martyrdom. I want him to apologize. On his knees. With his throat bared." "Okay, look," Rowan said, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "I can apologize. I am very good at apologizing. I apologize for the butt comment. It was unprofessional. It was a high-pitched, terrifying shriek cut through the air. It did not come from the soldiers. It came from behind the Fenari line. A small crate on the Fenari grav sled rattled violently. The lid popped open, and a small, furry shape exploded outward, scrambling onto the floor. It was a kit. A Fenari child no taller than Rowan's knee, with oversized ears and fur the color of storm clouds. He was shaking violently, his large eyes wet with terror. "Pip!" Sable shouted, her composure cracking instantly. "No, stay back." The child. Pip was in a blind panic. The noise, the smell of ozone, and the overwhelming aggression in the room had shattered his control. He scurried across the open floor, slipping on the smooth metal frantic to find cover. He wedged himself between a hydraulic piston and the wall right next to the blast doors, the only exit. "Do not shoot!" Rowan yelled, throwing his arms out wide to block his own security team's line of sight. "It is a kid! Hold fire!" "Retrieve the kit!" Rask barked at his squad. Two Fenari guards lunged forward to grab the child. "No!" Pip screamed, a sound that was half squeak, half snarl. He lashed out small claws, sparking against the metal. He was terrified of the armored giants, even his own kind. He was cornered, and a cornered animal, no matter how small, was dangerous. "Stop!" Sable ordered, realizing the guards were only making it worse. "You will scare him into cardiac arrest. Back away." The guards froze. The child was hyperventilating, his small chest heaving rapidly. If he went into shock, his heart could stop within minutes. Fenari physiology was robust against trauma, but fragile against extreme stress in adolescence. The room was paralyzed. The exit was blocked by a terrified child. The diplomats were armed. The captain was compromised. Rowan looked at the shivering ball of fur. He looked at the guns pointed at him. He looked at Sable, who looked ready to tear the station apart with her bare hands to get to the boy, but dared not move for fear of triggering the humans. Rowan exhaled. He lowered his hands slowly. "Hey," he said softly. He switched off the translator. He did not need the machine to mistranslate kindness. He took a step toward the child. "Human," Rask warned, raising his rifle. "One step closer and I vaporize you." "Shut up," Rowan said without looking back. His voice was calm, authoritative, and surprisingly steady. "You are scaring him. Just shut up for a minute." He knelt down on the cold metal deck. He was still 10 feet away from Pip. He made himself small, hunched his shoulders, and averted his eyes, looking at the floor near the child's paws, rather than directly at him. It was a universal signal. I am not a threat. I am submitting. "Hey there, little guy," Rowan murmured. He kept his voice low, a rhythmic drone. "It is loud in here, right? Too many people. Too many angry, shouting idiots." Pip stopped screaming, but he was still trembling, a low growl rumbling in his throat. His ears were pinned back flat against his skull. "I know," Rowan said. "I want to hide too. Honestly, I would fit right in there with you if my shoulders were not so broad." Rowan slid one hand forward along the floor, palm up. Empty, vulnerable. Sable watched her breath caught in her throat. She had never seen a human do this. Usually they shouted, they negotiated, they tried to control. This male was making himself prey. "Come on," Rowan whispered. "I have survived my relatives at Thanksgiving dinner. I can handle a bad day at the office. You are safe." Pip sniffed the air. He smelled the fear on Rowan, but he also smelled something else underneath it, a strange, stubborn warmth. A lack of aggression. Rowan extended his finger slowly. "You can come out, I promise. Just if you are going to bite gently, okay? I need these fingers for typing." Pip lunged. It was not a playful motion. It was a strike of pure blind instinct. The child shot forward and clamped his jaws down on Rowan's extended index finger. "Gah!" Rowan hissed through his teeth. Pain flared sharp and hot. The kit's teeth were like needles. They punctured the skin and hit the bone. Blood welled up instantly, dripping onto the deck. The Fenari guards raised their weapons. The human guards raised theirs. "Don't shoot!" Rowan shouted, gritting his teeth against the pain. He did not pull his hand back. He did not strike the child. He stayed perfectly still, letting the blood run, letting the child anchor himself to the only thing that wasn't screaming or holding a gun. "I am fine. Nobody shoot." Pip realized he had bitten something that did not fight back. The taste of copper filled his mouth. He looked up, his eyes meeting Rowan's. Rowan was grimacing, sweat beading on his forehead, but he wasn't angry. He was just there. Pip released the finger, stepping back confused. He let out a soft, apologetic whimper. "It is okay," Rowan breathed, cradling his hand. "That was a good one. You have got good teeth, kid." Sable was there in a heartbeat. She moved faster than Rowan's eyes could track. One moment she was 10 meters away, the next she was kneeling beside him. She grabbed his wrist. Her grip was iron-strong. "Captain," Rowan gasped. "I am fine, it is just a scratch." "Silence," Sable commanded. Her eyes were not on his face. They were locked on the wound. Fenari saliva contained a potent coagulant and a mild paralytic, an evolutionary trait designed to lick their own wounds in the wild, to prevent infection and blood loss. It was a medical instinct hardwired into their biology. When a packmate bled, you fixed it. And in that moment, fueled by the adrenaline of the insult, the fear for Pip, and the bizarre confusion of the human's kindness, Sable reverted to instinct. She brought Rowan's bleeding finger to her mouth and licked the wound. It was rough, wet, and incredibly strange. Her tongue was like a cat's, covered in tiny papillae. But the moment her saliva touched his open blood, something impossible happened. It was not a spark. It was a lightning strike. Rowan gasped, his back arching involuntarily. A wave of heat, searing and white-hot, shot up his arm, bypassed his brain, and slammed directly into his heart. It felt like someone had hooked him up to a fusion reactor. His vision blurred, the gray hangar dissolving into a kaleidoscope of gold and red. "Mine," a voice whispered. Not in his ear, but inside the center of his skull. "Safe. Found." Sable froze. Her pupils blew wide, eclipsing the gold. She dropped his hand as if it were red-hot iron, staggering back. She clutched her chest, gasping for air. Thump, 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 thump. The sound was deafening. It was a heartbeat. But it wasn't just hers. It was a double rhythm, a syncopated echo that rattled her ribcage. She looked at Rowan and she could feel his confusion, his shock, and the dull throb of pain in his finger, as if it were her own. "What?" Rowan stammered, clutching his chest. "What did you do to me?" Sable stared at him, horror and wonder warring on her face. "I sealed the wound. I initiated." Before she could finish, the station's automated alarms began to scream. Red klaxons rotated, bathing the hangar in blood-colored light. "Biological contamination detected," the station. AI announced its voice, a pleasant monotone female. "Unauthorized genetic merger identified. Class 4, anomaly, initiating lockdown." Heavy blast shields slammed down over the windows. The main doors groaned and sealed shut with a magnetic thud that shook the floor. "Lockdown!" Chief Rask shouted, spinning around. "They are trapping us!" "No," Sable whispered. She looked at her hands, then at Rowan. The heat in her blood was not fading. It was settling, becoming a permanent hum under her skin. "The system detected the link. It thinks we are a plague." Rowan struggled to his feet, swaying. Pip, sensing the shift, ran not to Sable, but to Rowan. The child grabbed the leg of Rowan's flight suit, burying his face in the fabric. "Captain," Rowan said, his voice trembling. "Why can I hear your pulse in my head?" Sable looked at him. The anger was gone, replaced by something far more terrifying: recognition. "You are not a diplomat anymore, Rowan Mercer," she said softly. "You are a liability." High above them in the command spire of the Fenari flagship orbiting the station, Archmatron Caldera Thrax watched the feed on her monitor. She saw the bite. She saw the lick. She saw the thermal imaging bloom with the undeniable signature of a biological bond forming between a highborn captain and a human stray. Thrax smiled. It was a cold, thin expression that did not reach her eyes. "The key has been cut," Thrax said to the shadows of her bridge. "The human is compatible. He carries the sequence." She tapped the screen where Rowan's face was frozen in shock. "I want him. And I want the child. Secure them." Back in the hangar, the stalemate had shifted. The humans and Fenari were no longer pointing guns at each other. They were pointing them at the doors trapped together in the red light. Sable straightened up. She forced the connection to the back of her mind, building a mental wall around the sensation of Rowan's panic. She needed to be a captain again. "Rask!" she barked. "Secure the perimeter! No one comes in or out until I understand what this station is doing." "And the human?" Rask asked, sneering at Rowan. Sable looked at Rowan. She looked at Pip clinging to his leg. She looked at the hand she had just licked the taste of his blood, still sharp on her tongue. "He is under medical quarantine," Sable said, her voice brooking no argument. "By the authority of the High Fleet. He has been exposed to a biological agent." "I have?" Rowan asked, blinking. "Me," Sable said grimly. "Take him to my quarters. Use the portable containment field. And bring the kit." "Your quarters, Captain?" Rask asked, skeptical. "Is that wise?" "It is an order, Chief." Sable turned on her heel, her cape swirling. "Move, before the station decides to purge us all with fire." Two guards grabbed Rowan by the arms. He didn't fight. He was too busy trying to understand why, despite the fear and the guns and the alarm, he suddenly felt an overwhelming urge to make sure Sable was drinking enough water. As the doors to the captain's private transport locked them in, Pip climbed up Rowan's leg and settled into the crook of his arm, purring softly. Rowan looked at the child, then at the captain who was staring at the wall, refusing to meet his eyes. 2 days, Rowan whispered to himself, echoing the quarantine protocol he knew was standard. "Locked in a room with a space fox who thinks I proposed to her butt. This is going to be a long 48 hours. The door to the captain's quarters sealed with a heavy, pressurized hiss that sounded uncomfortably like the lid of a coffin sliding into place. The air inside was scrubbed clean, smelling faintly of ozone and expensive filtration systems, a sharp contrast to the greasy, metallic tang of the exchange deck. Rowan Mercer stood in the center of the room, still cradling his throbbing hand. He looked around. The space was vast but aggressively minimalist. The walls were a matte charcoal alloy absorbing the light, rather than reflecting it. There was a sleeping platform that looked as soft as a slab of granite, a workstation that hummed with quiet menace, and a single angular chair. It did not look like a home. It looked like a holding cell for someone who hated clutter. Rowan let out a breath he felt he had been holding for 20 minutes. He turned to Captain Sable Ardent, who was standing by the door, her back rigid, her hand still hovering near the control panel. "Congratulations," Rowan said, his voice echoing slightly in the Stark room. "This is officially the most luxurious prison I have ever been thrown into. I assume the torture devices are hidden behind that tasteful wall panel." Sable did not turn around immediately. Her shoulders were tense, the fur along her neck standing up in jagged spikes. When she finally faced him, her expression was a mask of cold ceramic discipline. "Do not get comfortable," she said. Her voice was dry, stripping away the humidity in the room. "I do not like this any more than you do. This is a containment protocol, not a hospitality suite." She said the words with the flat affect of a military officer reading a supply manifest, but Rowan flinched. He flinched because at the exact moment She spoke of dislike. A wave of crushing claustrophobic panic washed over him. It was not his panic. It felt foreign, sharper, smelling of burnt wiring and copper. It was her panic bleeding through the invisible tether that now connected their nervous systems. Rowan rubbed his chest, trying to massage away the phantom anxiety. "If you are going to lie to me, Captain, you might want to figure out how to mute the broadcast channel in my head. You are terrified." Sable's eyes narrowed. The golden irises seemed to spin. "I am a captain of the High Fleet. I do not get terrified. I assess tactical disadvantages." "Right," Rowan said. "Well, your tactical disadvantage feels like a heart attack." He sat down on the edge of the sleeping platform because his knees suddenly felt like water. Pip the Fenari child was still clinging to his leg. The boy looked up, his large ears drooping, sensing the thick tension in the room. Rowan reached down and patted the kid's head awkwardly. Pip let out a soft chirp and scrambled up onto the platform, curling into a tight ball against Rowan's hip. Sable watched them. The sight of the human touching the kit sent a jolt through her, a mix of possessiveness and profound confusion. She shook her head, forcing the biological noise into a box in the back of her mind. "We have 48 hours, Sable said, walking toward a medical cabinet embedded in the wall. "The station AI has flagged us as a biological hazard. Until the incubation period of the link stabilizes, the door will not open for anything less than a hull breach." "The link," Rowan repeated. He looked at his finger. The blood had stopped flowing, but the wound throbbed with a dull, rhythmic heat. "You mean the part where you licked me, and I saw the face of God for a split second?" Sable pulled a tray of instruments from the cabinet. "Do not be crude. It is a biological imperative. Fenari saliva contains a symbiotic enzyme. In the wild, it prevents infection and accelerates tissue regeneration. When applied to a compatible genetic match, it initiates a bond." She turned to face him, holding a canister of sterile water and a clean cloth. She looked reluctant. "The wound needs to be cleaned," she stated. "The enzyme is active, but the structural damage to your finger requires maintenance. If the saliva dries out before the graft takes, the connection will sever, and your immune system will likely go into shock. It could kill you." Rowan stared at her. "So what you are saying is, you have to do it again." Sable's jaw tightened. "Yes." "Great," Rowan said, leaning his head back against the wall. "Just great. No pressure. Just casual cannibalism to save my life." "Give me your hand," Sable ordered. Rowan hesitated. He was an engineer. He understood mechanics, leverage, and load-bearing structures. He did not understand the alchemy of alien biology. But he offered his hand. Sable took it. Her gloves were removed, now revealing hands that were covered in fine, velvet soft fur. Her fingers were long-tipped, with retractable claws that were currently sheathed. Her touch was cool, but where skin met skin, the heat flared up again. She cleaned the dried blood around the bite mark with efficiency. Rowan watched her face. Up close, she was terrifyingly beautiful. Not in a human way, but in the way a thunderstorm or a suspension bridge was beautiful. She was built for purpose. "This will sting," she warned. She lowered her head. Rowan looked away, focusing on a rivet in the ceiling. He felt the rough, wet rasp of her tongue against his skin. The sensation was electric. It was not sexual exactly. It was far too intense for that. It felt like someone was welding his nerves back together with lightning. He gasped, his free hand gripping the edge of the mattress until his knuckles turned white. Sable pulled back. She was breathing hard, her nostrils flaring. "It is done," she whispered. Rowan looked at his finger. The wound was no longer a jagged tear. It was sealed with a translucent, shimmering film. Underneath the skin, faint lines of light were pulsing, syncing with the beat of his heart. "You own me now, do you not?" Rowan asked quietly. The humor was gone from his voice. Sable froze. She began packing away the medical supplies with unnecessary force. The link is a biological fact. It does not imply ownership. Does it? Rowan challenged. He stood up careful not to dislodge Pip. I read the briefing files on Fenari culture. Not the diplomatic ones. The anthropologist notes. The link is usually between a matriarch and her. What is the word chosen subordinate? It creates a hierarchy. You feel what I feel so you can control it. Sable turned her eyes flashing. You are not a subordinate. You are a soft-skinned alien who stood in front of a gun for a child not of his own species. That is not the behavior of a subordinate. Good, Rowan said. He crossed his arms. Because I need to set some ground rules. If we are stuck in here for 2 days, you need to know something. I do not do pet. I do not do possession. I am an engineer. I fix things. I do not belong to things. He took a step toward her, invading her space just enough to prove a point. If you try to order me around like one of your crew, or if you try to use this connection to push me into a corner, I will talk. I will talk incessantly. I will explain the history of the internal combustion engine in excruciating detail. I will recite bad poetry. I will argue with your ship's AI until it submits a resignation letter. Do you understand? Sable stared at him. Most males of her species would have lowered their throats in submission by now. The link projected her authority, her rank, her power, her physical dominance directly into his brain. He should be cowering. Instead, he was threatening her with boredom. A corner of her mouth twitched. It might have been a snarl, but it looked suspiciously like a smile. Understood, Mercer, she said. No poetry. Suddenly, a high-pitched keen cut through the air. Pip was sitting up on the bed, his large eyes brimming with tears. The spike in aggression between Rowan and Sable had hit him like a physical blow. The child was rocking back and forth, clutching his own ears. Sable's face crumbled. The Iron Captain vanished, replaced by someone helpless. He feels it, she whispered. My anger, my stress. It hurts him. She moved to go to the child, but stopped. She was a warrior. Her touch was meant for violence or discipline. She did not know how to be soft. Rowan saw the hesitation. He saw the way she looked at her own hands as if they were weapons she couldn't holster. He walked past her and sat back down on the bed. He scooped Pip up. The kit was heavy, dense with muscle, despite his size, but he was shivering violently. Hey, Rowan murmured, rubbing the spot behind Pip's ears. It is okay. The captain and I are just discussing terms. Nobody is fighting. Pip buried his face in Rowan's shirt, sniffing loudly. You know, Rowan said, his voice dropping to a low, soothing rumble. You remind me of a story. Sable watched from the center of the room. She should stop him. Human nonsense would not comfort a Fenari child. But she could feel the change in the room's atmosphere. Rowan's anxiety was fading, replaced by a warm, steady resolve. Long ago, Rowan said to Pip, on my home planet there were these little yellow flowers. We called them dandelions. People hated them. They called them weeds. They tried to poison them, dig them up, burn them. They wanted perfect green grass. But the dandelions, they did not care. Pip stopped crying to listen, though he surely did not understand the words. He understood the tone. The dandelions had deep roots, Rowan continued. And when the wind blew, they turned into these little white puffs and flew everywhere. They landed on concrete, on rocks, in the cracks of sidewalks. And they grew. They survived because they were not trying to be the strongest tree in the forest. They were just stubborn. They decided that living was better than being perfect. Rowan looked up and met Sable's eyes. That is my people, Pip. We are not strong like the Fenari. We do not have claws. We do not have armor. But we are stubborn and we love the things we decide to keep. That is how we survive. We just refuse to go away. Sable felt a strange ache in her chest. It was not the link. It was something else. Something she had not authorized. She watched the human hold the sobbing child, saw the gentle way his thumb stroked the soft fur of the kit's ear, and she realized he was telling the truth. He was not strong. He was unbreakable. "Rest," Sable said, her voice unusually soft. Her voice. "The lights will dim in 10 minutes. We should conserve energy." The first night passed in a blur of uneasy silence. Rowan slept curled around Pip on the platform. Sable sat in the chair, watching the door, watching them. She did not sleep. By the afternoon of the second day, the atmosphere in the cabin had shifted from hostile to heavy. The air felt charged like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Rowan was sitting at the workstation, trying to interface his datapad with the Fenari system to check the news feeds. Sable was pacing. She had walked the length of the room 400 times. Rowan had counted. "You are going to wear a hole in the floor," Rowan commented, without looking up. "My ship is sitting in a hostile dock," Sable snapped. "My crew is leaderless, and I am trapped in a box with a diplomat." "Engineer," Rowan corrected. "And your crew is fine. Rask is terrifying. I am sure he has frightened the docking clamps into staying locked." Sable stopped pacing. She looked at Rowan. "Your hand." Rowan looked down. The bandage she had applied earlier was loose. The throbbing had returned sharper this time. "Time for another dose?" he asked, trying to keep his voice light. "Yes." This time, neither of them argued. Rowan held out his hand. Sable took it. The routine was the same, but the familiarity made it worse, not better. The shock of the first time was gone, replaced by an anticipation that made Rowan's breath catch in his throat. Sable lowered her head. She licked the wound. Rowan closed his eyes. The heat rushed through him, but this time it did not just stay in his chest. It spread out, illuminating his nervous system. And then the room lit up. "Whoa!" Rowan gasped, pulling his hand back. He held his hand up. The skin around the bite mark was transparent. Beneath the dermis, the veins were glowing with a soft, bioluminescent blue light. But it was not just a glow. The light was moving. It was forming shapes, rigid geometric patterns that shifted and reconfigured with every beat of his heart. "That is not normal," Rowan said. "Tell me that is normal." Sable stared at the glowing script on his hand. Her face went pale beneath her fur. "No, that is not normal. The link creates a bond, not a light show." "Computer," Rowan shouted at the room, "scan this. What is happening to my hand?" A holographic avatar flickered into existence in the center of the room. It was the ship's AI Morrow. The avatar took the form of a geometric abstract shape, sharp angles, and floating cubes. "Scanning," Morrow said. The AI's voice was dry masculine and sounded perpetually unimpressed. "Interesting. It appears, Engineer Mercer, that you are no longer just a biological entity. You are now a storage device." "Explain," Sable ordered, stepping closer to inspect the glow. "The biological agents in your saliva, Captain, did not just repair the tissue," Morrow droned. "They interacted with a latent genetic marker in the human's DNA. Or rather, they wrote to it. The pattern on his hand is not infection. It is code." "Code?" Rowan asked, turning his hand over. The symbols swirled, mesmerizing. "What kind of code?" "Navigational syntax," Morrow replied. "Old dialect. Pre-Federation Fenari. It is trying to interface with the door lock, but the protocol is too advanced for a standard door. It is broadcasting a set of coordinates." "Coordinates to where?" Sable asked. Morrow processed for a second. "Sector 7-9, the Deep Expanse, specifically a region of unstable space colloquially known as the Lullaby Gate." Sable went rigid. "That is impossible. The Lullaby Gate is a myth. A ghost story." "It is a ghost story that has a specific astro-navigational address," Morrow corrected. "The signal strength is increasing. The human is acting as a transmitter. And might I add, the signal seems to be causing a minor fluctuation in the local reality manifold. You might want to hold on to something." Wait, Rowan said. Lullaby Gate. Why does that sound like a place where people go to die? Not die, Sable said, her voice hollow. Forget. The legends say the gate emits a frequency that unravels neural pathways. Sailors who go near it lose their memories. First their names, then their families, then how to breathe. Charming, Rowan muttered. And I have the map to this place glowing on my finger. It appears so, Morrow said. However, we have a more immediate problem. Incoming transmission from the flagship. Priority 1. Archmatron Caldera Thrax. The room's main view screen flickered to life before Sable could refuse the call. The face of Caldera Thrax filled the wall. She was older than Sable, her fur graying at the muzzle, her eyes hard and devoid of any warmth. She wore the heavy ceremonial armor of the High Council. Captain Ardent, Thrax said. Her voice was smooth, cultured, and dripping with venom. I trust your quarantine is proving educational. Archmatron, Sable nodded stiffly. We are containing the situation. The situation has evolved, Thrax said. Our sensors picked up the energy spike from the human. He is broadcasting. He has the key. Sable stepped in front of Rowan, blocking him from the screen. He is a diplomat under my protection. He is not an object. He is a container, Thrax corrected. And the child Pip is property of the Royal Creche. You are harboring a stolen asset and a dangerous biological anomaly. I am ordering you to transfer them to my custody immediately, for the stability of the fleet. Transfer, Rowan's voice cut in. He stepped out from behind Sable. He looked small next to the giant screen, but he stood with his feet apart, hands on his hips. I think there is a mistranslation. Thrax's eyes shifted to Rowan. She looked at him like he was a stain on the carpet. You speak when spoken to soft skin. No, I speak when I have something to say, Rowan said. And right now, I am saying this, I am not going anywhere with you. And neither is the kid. You are in no position to negotiate, Thrax sneered. Actually, I am, Rowan said. He held up his glowing hand. According to your AI, I am the map. You want the map? You need the human. And humans are very fragile. If you try to drag me onto your ship, my cortisol levels go up, my heart rate spikes, and oops, maybe I have a stroke. Humans are notoriously breakable. Sable looked at him surprised. He was bluffing. He was using his own weakness as a weapon. Here are the terms, Rowan continued, his voice hardening. Pip stays with us. No cages. No labs. I am not a detainee. I am a liaison. And if we are going to this Lullaby Gate, or wherever this light is pointing, the Terran Alliance comes with us. We get a seat at the table. If this is big enough to start a war, it is big enough to require witnesses. Thrax stared at him for a long moment. The silence stretched thin and tight. You are arrogant, Thrax said finally. It will make breaking you very satisfying. The screen went black. Rowan let out a breath and slumped against the wall. His hands were shaking. That was foolish, Sable said, though there was no heat in her voice. She will not accept those terms. She will, Rowan said. Because she is greedy. She wants the map more than she wants to punish me. At least for now. Sable looked at him. Really looked at him. For the first time since he had arrived on the deck, she did not see a fragile thing that needed protecting, nor a diplomatic nuisance. She saw a creature that, despite having no armor and no claws, had just stared down the most dangerous warlord in the sector. You have a strange definition of survival, Mercer, she said. It is the dandelion method, Rowan grinned weakly. Annoy them until they let you grow. Night fell on the second day. The cabin was dark, lit only by the faint, rhythmic pulse of the mark on Rowan's hand and the ambient starlight from the viewport. Pip was asleep on the platform, twitching in a dream. Rowan sat on the floor, back against the wall. Sable sat opposite him, her legs drawn up. The silence was different now. It was not empty. It was filled with the hum of the link, a shared current of emotion that flowed between them. Sable made a sound. It was a hitch in her breath. Rowan looked up. In the dim light, he saw her shoulders shaking. She was crying. It was a silent, terrifying thing, a warrior breaking down without making a sound. Through the link, Rowan felt it. He felt the crushing weight of her duty, the fear that she was defective because she cared about the child, the terror that the link would consume her identity, that she would lose herself in him, the shame of needing him. Rowan did not move to touch her. He knew she would shatter if he did. "I hear you," he said into the dark, His voice was a whisper, barely there. Sable did not look up. She pressed her face into her knees. "I am not going to fix it," Rowan said. "I cannot fix it. But I am not leaving. You are not alone in the dark, Sable. Not anymore." Sable let out a shuddering breath. The panic in her chest receded, just a fraction, pushed back by the steady, stubborn calm of the human across the room. He was not trying to take her power. He was just holding the flashlight. "Thank you," she whispered. Suddenly the mark on Rowan's hand flared. The blue light intensified, turning blindingly white. The lock on the cabin door clicked. Clang, hiss. The heavy blast door, which had been sealed by the station's highest security protocol, slid open smoothly. Rowan scrambled to his feet. "Did you do that?" Sable stood up, wiping her face quickly, the mask of command sliding back into place. "No, I did not touch the controls." "It is the coordinates." Morrow's voice came from the ceiling speakers. "The signal just synchronized with the station's nav computer. The lockdown has been overridden. The gate is calling." Rowan looked at the open door. Beyond it lay the corridor, the ship, and the vast, terrifying unknown of deep space. "Well," Rowan said, looking at his glowing hand, "I guess we are not prisoners anymore." Sable walked to the door. She looked back at him, her golden eyes fierce and bright. "No," she said. "Now we are hunters." She extended her hand to him. Not a command. An offer. Rowan looked at it. He looked at Pip, who was waking up, rubbing his eyes. He looked at the woman who could crush him with one hand, but had chosen to let him see her cry. He took her hand. "After you, Captain." The engines of the Rooklight did not hum. They sang. It was a low, resonant baritone vibration that traveled through the deck plates and into the soles of Rowan Mercer's boots. He walked down the corridor of the Fenari cruiser, acutely aware that he was the only thing on board without fur claws, or a pedigree tracing back to an orbital warlord. Pip trotted beside him, his small claws clicking on the metal. The kit had refused to leave Rowan's side since they fled the station, treating Rowan's leg as a mobile safety blanket. The corridor was wide, designed for being 7 feet tall with broad shoulders. Crew members passed them, engineers in gray jumpsuits, Marines in matte black armor. The silence that fell as Rowan passed was heavy enough to bruise. He could feel their eyes. Some looked at the glowing blue bandage on his hand with superstitious awe. Others looked at his human face with undisguised contempt. To half the crew, he was a holy vessel chosen by the captain. To the other half, he was a diplomatic error that had stained their commander's honor. "Keep walking," Rowan muttered to himself. "Just a tourist. A very heavily scrutinized tourist." He turned a corner and nearly collided with a wall of muscle. It was Chief Rask. The head of security stood with his arms crossed, blocking the hallway. Behind him were 3 other Marines, their expressions unreadable masks of stone. "The soft skin walks freely," Rask rumbled. His voice sounded like gravel grinding in a mixer. "The captain allows it. The crew questions it." Rowan stopped. He gently nudged Pip behind his legs. "I am just heading to the mess hall, Chief. Unless eating is also a violation of protocol." Rask stepped forward. He loomed over Rowan, blocking out the overhead lights. You carry the captain's mark. You hold the child of the creche. But you have not earned the right to breathe our air. You are a pet human. And pets are kept in cages. Rowan felt the familiar spike of adrenaline. His heart rate monitor, which he knew Sable could hear, probably just pinged in her ear on the bridge. I am not a pet, Rowan said, keeping his voice steady. And I am not a passenger. I am the reason you are not currently being dissected by the station security grid back at Gleam Harbor. Rask bared his teeth. Words. Humans are made of words. Soft words. When the hull cracks, words do not hold the atmosphere in. Strength does. Resilience does. He pointed a clawed finger at the center of the corridor. A trial, Rask declared. The circle of iron. If you stand, you are crew. If you fall, you return to the brig, and I tell the captain you tripped. Rowan looked at the Marines. He looked at Rask, who weighed at least 300 pounds of dense muscle. He sighed. No weapons, Rowan asked. Flesh and bone, Rask said. If you have any bone worth breaking. Rowan handed his data pad to a confused ensign nearby. He knelt down and whispered to Pip. Stay there. Do not bite anyone unless they bite me first. He stood up and unzipped his flight jacket, tossing it aside. Underneath, he wore a standard gray t-shirt that looked pitifully thin compared to the Fenari armored weaves. Fine, Rowan said. Let us get this over with. I am starving. The circle of iron was not a formal ring. It was simply the crew clearing a space in the cargo bay 5 minutes later. Word had spread fast. Dozens of Fenari hung from the catwalks and crowded the deck, their golden eyes watching with predatory interest. Sable Ardent stood on the observation deck above. She gripped the railing, her knuckles white. She could stop this. One word from her, and Rask would stand down. Do not intervene, Morrow's voice came from the comms. If you save him, he remains a pet in their eyes. He must stand on his own feet. He will be broken, Sable whispered. Rask breaks Durasteel bulkheads for exercise. Down on the deck, Rask circled Rowan. The Fenari moved with deceptive speed, testing Rowan's reactions. Rowan kept his hands up, palms open. He did not take a fighting stance. He stood loose, relaxed, almost lazy. Strike me, Rask taunted. Show me your fury. I do not have fury, Rowan said. I have low blood sugar, Rask roared and lunged. It was a telegraphed blow, a massive backhand meant to send Rowan flying into the wall. Rowan did not block. He dropped. He collapsed his knees, letting gravity take him under the swing. As Rask's momentum carried the massive alien forward, Rowan pivoted on his heel, grabbed Rask's ankle, and pulled. It was simple physics. Even a 300-pound warrior needs a center of gravity. Rask stumbled, crashing face first into a stack of crates. The cargo bay erupted in gasps. Rask scrambled up, his eyes burning with humiliation. Trickery! Gravity, Rowan corrected, standing back up. It is a universal law. You should respect it. Rask charged again, this time faster, lower. He tackled Rowan, slamming him into the deck plates. The impact knocked the wind out of Rowan. Stars burst in his vision. Rask raised a fist that looked like a sledgehammer. Rowan did not panic. He did not flail. He did the one thing Rask did not expect. He went limp. When Rask struck, the blow glanced off Rowan's shoulder, rather than shattering his ribs, because Rowan rolled with the impact instead of bracing against it. Rowan gritted his teeth against the pain. It felt like being kicked by a mule, but he used the proximity to jam his elbow into the sensitive nerve cluster under Rask's armpit. Rask howled and recoiled. Rowan scrambled up. He was bruising already. His lip was split. He spat a mouthful of blood onto the pristine deck. Stay down, Rask bellowed. You are beaten. No, Rowan wheezed. He wiped his mouth. I am just warming up. Rask hit him again. A solid punch to the gut. Rowan folded. He fell to his knees. Stay down, Rask screamed. Rowan coughed, gasping for air. He put one hand on the floor. He pushed. His arms shook, but he rose. He stood up. He swayed, but he stood. "Is that it?" Rowan rasped. For 10 minutes, it continued. Rask threw him. Rask hit him. Rask slammed him. And every single time Rowan Mercer stood back up, he did not fight back with strength. He fought with an infuriating, illogical refusal to stop being vertical. Finally, Rask stood, panting, his chest heaving. Rowan was leaning against a crate, one eye, swelling shut, clutching his ribs. But he was smiling. A bloody, jagged smile. "Why?" Rask growled, confused. "Why do you not yield? You cannot win." "I do not have to win," Rowan said, his voice thick. "I just have to not lose. That is what humans do, Chief. We are not stronger than the storm. We just wait until the storm gets tired." Rowan tapped his own chest. "I am strongest at being stubborn." Rask stared at him. The Fenari culture was built on dominance and submission. When you were beaten, you submitted. To keep standing when you could not win was either madness or a kind of courage they had no word for. Slowly, Rask lowered his fists. He looked at Rowan, then at the blood on his own knuckles. "You bleed well," Rask said quietly. It was the highest compliment he could give. Rask turned to the crowd. "The human is crew. He breaks poorly. He stays." The chief looked back at Rowan and thumped his own chest once, a salute. Then he marched away. Rowan slid down the crate and sat on the floor. "Okay," he whispered to the spinning room. "Now I think I am going to pass out." Above, on the balcony, Sable released the breath she had been holding. She felt a strange sensation in her chest, warm and terrifying. It was pride, and something deeper, trust. He had not called for her. He had not used the link to beg for help. He had bled to prove he belonged beside her. "Medical team," Sable ordered into her comms, her voice shaking slightly. "Get him to the infirmary, now." The infirmary was bright and smelled of antiseptic mist. Rowan sat on a bio bed, wincing as a medical drone knitted the skin over his ribs back together with a laser suture. Morrow's avatar hovered over a console, analyzing a sample of Rowan's blood. Sable stood by the doorarms, crossed, watching him like a hawk. "You are an idiot," Sable said. "I am a crew member," Rowan corrected. "There is a difference. Ouch. Watch the laser doc." "I am not a doctor," Morrow said. "I am a hyper-intelligent navigation interface forced to moonlight as a nurse. And the analysis is complete." Morrow projected a hologram of a DNA helix into the air. It was Rowan's DNA, but it was changing. "The biological fibers from the captain's saliva are not just sitting in your bloodstream," Morrow explained. "They are actively rewriting your cellular structure. Look here." He zoomed in on a strand. Gold filaments were weaving through the human double helix, reinforcing it, adding new data sequences. "It is a restructuring mechanism," Morrow said. "The link is not just emotional. It is designing you to survive. It is reinforcing your bone density, enhancing your neural conductivity. It is trying to make you compatible." "Compatible with what?" Rowan asked. "With the gate," Sable said softly. She walked over and looked at the hologram. "The legends say the lullaby gate destroys the weak. It tears minds apart. If the link is upgrading you, it means the gate expects you to go inside." "So I am being terraformed," Rowan said. "Into a key." "Into a partner," Sable corrected. She looked at him, her golden eyes intense. "It is not overwriting you, Rowan. It is harmonizing." Before Rowan could respond, the ship lurched. A low, resonant thrum vibrated through the hull deeper than the engines. "Proximity alert," Morrow said. "We are entering the outer radius of the lullaby anomaly." "Already?" Sable asked. "We are light years away." "The signal is amplifying," Morrow said. "And we have a casualty." The door to the infirmary hissed open. A young Fennery ensign stumbled in. He looked perfectly healthy, but his eyes were wide and vacant. He grabbed Sable's arm, ignoring protocol. "Captain," the ensign gasped. "I cannot find her." "Find who, ensign?" Sable asked gently. "My bondmate," the ensign whispered, tears leaking from his eyes. "I know I have one. I feel the space where she should be. But I cannot remember her face. I cannot remember her name." He looked at his hands trembling. "She is gone from my head, Captain. It is eating her." Rowan felt a chill go down his spine. This was the weapon of the gate. It did not kill you. It erased the things that made you human or Fenari. It took your love and left you hollow. "General quarters," Sable ordered, her voice hardening. "All crew to battle stations. Focus on your tasks. Do not think of home, do not think of family. The only thing that exists is the mission." The ensign nodded blankly and ran out. "We have to hurry," Rowan said, standing up and ignoring his sore ribs. "If we stay out here too long, we will arrive at the gate with an empty ship." "Captain," Rask's voice roared over the intercom. "Contact multiple signatures dropping out of warp. They are not military." Sable tapped the wall panel. On screen, the view outside showed the starfield. Suddenly, space tore open. 6 ships dropped into real space. They were ugly, jagged vessels painted with chaotic patterns. Mercenaries. Privateers. "Pirates," Rowan asked. "Private contractors," Sable corrected. "Thrax's wallet is deep. She has hired the Red Wake fleet." "They are hailing us," Morrow said. "They want the human and the kit. Or they open fire." "Tell them," Sable said, baring her teeth, "to come and take them." The battle began instantly. The Rooklight was a warship elegant and deadly. Her particle lances cut through the void, vaporizing the lead mercenary ship in a single volley. But there were too many of them. The mercenary ships swarmed like angry wasps, moving in erratic suicidal patterns that confused the Fenari targeting computers. Fenari warfare was ritualistic. It was based on duels on lines of fire, on honorable engagement ranges. These mercenaries fought like street brawlers. They jammed frequencies. They launched dirty debris clouds. They got in close. The Rooklight shuddered as a torpedo impacted the shields. "Shields down to 60%, Rask shouted from the bridge. "They are targeting the engines. They want to board us." In the command center, Sable stood amidst the chaos, shouting orders. Rowan stood by the navigation console, watching the tactical map. He saw the problem. The Fenari were trying to keep distance to use their superior range. But the mercenaries were hugging them, staying in their blind spots. "Captain," Rowan shouted over the alarms. "You are fighting them wrong," Sable whipped around. "I have 100 years of naval experience, Mercer. Do not tell me how to fight." "You are fighting them like they are soldiers," Rowan yelled back. "They are thugs. They know your protocols. They know you will not fire if there is a risk of collateral damage to your own hull. Look." He pointed at the map. 2 mercenary ships were tucked right under the Rooklight's belly, firing upward into the drive section. The Fenari turret guns couldn't depress low enough to hit them without blasting their own stabilizers. "So, what do you suggest?" Sable demanded. "Hug them back," Rowan said. "Cut the engines, drift. Let them think we are dead in the water. When they come in to latch on, we rotate the ship on the Z-axis, using the maneuvering thrusters manually." "That is insanity," Morrow interjected. "A manual rotation of a cruiser this size would shear the gravity plating." "It will throw them off," Rowan insisted. "It is the Crazy Ivan maneuver, or close enough. We use their ship as a shield against the others. We grab them." Sable looked at the map. She looked at Rowan. The link flared. She felt his certainty. It was not based on calculation. It was based on a gut feeling, a human intuition for chaotic brawling. "Helm," Sable barked. "Cut main engines, prepare for manual rotation on my mark." "Captain," the helmsman hesitated. "Do it." The Rooklight went dark. The hum of the engines died. The ship drifted, a massive silent shark in the dark. The mercenary ship, sensing victory, surged forward. The two ships under the belly extended grappling claws, preparing to board. "Wait for it," Rowan whispered, watching the proximity sensors. "Wait for it." "Now," Sable shouted. The maneuvering thrusters fired with explosive force. The massive cruiser spun on its axis with terrifying speed. Inside, gravity lurched sideways. Crew members grabbed onto railings. The Rooklight slammed its armored flank directly into the mercenary ship on its starboard side. Crunch. Metal screamed as the mercenary vessel was crushed against the cruiser's hull. The impact spun the Rooklight around, bringing its main dorsal batteries to bear directly on the second ship at point-blank range. "Fire!" Sable ordered. The cannons unleashed a storm of plasma. At this range, they couldn't miss. The second mercenary ship evaporated. Using the wreckage of the first ship as a physical shield, the Rooklight plowed through the debris field, its guns blazing, taking out two more confused attackers who hesitated to fire on their own allies' wreckage. The remaining two ships, realizing the payout was not worth the suicide mission, broke formation and fled into warp. Silence returned to the bridge, broken only by damage reports and the groaning of the hull. Sable slowly unclenched her hands from the command console. She looked at Rowan. He was pale, holding onto the navigation table, looking slightly green from the motion sickness. That, Sable said, was undignified. It was messy. It was brutal. A small smile touched her lips. And it was brilliant. Rowan managed a weak thumbs up. "We call it the bar fight doctrine. Start ugly, finish standing." Sable laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, startling the bridge crew. "Humans." She shook her head. "You are terrifyingly annoying. And annoying to terrify." Rowan felt a warmth bloom in his chest that had nothing to do with the link. She was looking at him with respect. Not as a key, not as a pet, but as a dangerous equal. "We need to salvage their data core," Rowan said, getting back to business. "Find out how they found us." The mercenary data core was a mess of encryption, but Morrow tore through it in minutes. Rowan, Sable, and Rask stood around the holographic table in the briefing room. "Here," Morrow said, highlighting a transaction log. "The Red Wake fleet was paid in advance. A massive sum, transferred from a shell account." "Trace it," Sable said. "Already done. It leads back to a private security fund authorized by the Office of Archmatron Caldera Thrax. But that is not the worst part." Morrow swiped the hologram, bringing up a schematic of the Fenari capital defense grid. "This is the purchase order attached to the payment. Thrax did not just buy mercenaries. She bought an override code for the capital's orbital traffic control system." "Why?" Rask asked. "She already controls the fleet." "She is locking down the sector," Sable realized. "She has declared the Rooklight a rogue vessel. She has fed the defense grid a new target profile." "Let me guess," Rowan said. "Me." "Specifically your biometric signature," Morrow confirmed. "The moment we enter scanning range of the capital, every automated turret in the belt is going to lock onto your DNA. Thrax wants to force us to surrender or be blown out of the sky before we can broadcast the truth about the gate." The room went silent. Then Rowan's pocket buzzed. He pulled out his personal communicator. It was a secure Terran frequency. "It is Envoy Keen," Rowan said. "Answer it," Sable said. Rowan put it on speaker. "Mercer here." "Rowan," Mara Keen's voice was frantic. "Thank God. We thought you were dead. We tracked the battle signatures. What is happening?" "We survived, Mara. We are heading to the capital." "Do not," Keen shouted. "Listen to me, Rowan. The Alliance has cut a deal with Thrax." Rowan froze. "What?" Thrax contacted the Terran High Command. Keen explained, her voice thick with regret. "She told them you were being held hostage by a radical faction, Captain Arden's faction. She offered to return you and the child safely if we allow her to sanitize the situation. Rowan, the Alliance has ordered us to stand down. They are sending an extraction team to Thrax's flagship to pick you up. You have to get off that ship. Surrender to Thrax. It is the only way we can get you home." Rowan looked at Sable. Her face was impassive, but he felt the spike of betrayal through the link. She expected this. Everyone left eventually. "Rowan," Keen continued, "think about it. This isn't our war. You are an engineer, not a martyr. Come home. We can have you back on Earth in 3 days. You can have a hot shower and real food, just walk away." It was a tempting offer. The safety of Earth, the end of the fear. No more mental voices, no more crazy warlords. Rowan looked down. Pip had wandered into the room. The Kit sensed the mood and walked over to Rowan. He didn't climb up this time. He just leaned his head against Rowan's knee and let out a long, trusting sigh. The mark on Rowan's hand pulsed, a steady, rhythmic beat. Thump, thump. He looked at Sable. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the star map, already calculating a path that would let him escape. She was preparing to let him go. "Mara," Rowan said into the comms. "I am here, Rowan. Just say the word. Tell the High Command," Rowan said, his voice hard, "that they can take their deal and file it under cowardice. I am not a hostage. I am a volunteer." "Rowan, you are going to die, maybe," Rowan said. "But I am not going to be a resource you trade for political favors. And I am not leaving my family." He realized he had said the word before he thought about it. Family. Sable's head snapped up. "Rowan," Keen started. "I am out, Mara. Mercer out." He crushed the connection. Silence filled the room. "You could have gone home," Sable said quietly. "I am home," Rowan said. He picked up Pip. "Or at least I am close enough. Now, how do we get past a defense grid that wants to vaporize me?" "We do not sneak," Sable said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her face. "If Thrax wants a target, we give her one. We fly right down the main corridor. With all the guns pointed at us." "With all the guns pointed at you," Sable corrected. "But they cannot fire if we are too close to something they cannot destroy." "And what is that?" "The throne tower," Sable said. "We are going to park the Rooklight on the Archmatron's front lawn." The arrival at the Fenari capital belt was a spectacle of terrifying majesty. The planet was surrounded by a ring of glittering orbital habitats and massive defense platforms. As the Rooklight dropped out of warp, the warnings screamed instantly. "Lockdown detected," Morrow shouted. 500 targeting locks engaged. They are tracking the engineer. "Shields to maximum forward." Sable ordered. "Full impulse. Drive us straight at the spire." The sky lit up with laser fire. The Rooklight shook violently. Explosions blossomed against the shields. "They are trying to disable our engines," Rask yelled. Rowan stood on the bridge, holding the railing with one hand and clutching his glowing finger with the other. The pain was blinding now. The gate was close. He could hear it singing in his head a song of sorrow and forgetting. "Closer!" Sable shouted. "Get us into the atmospheric envelope. Shields failing. We are through." The cruiser broke through the cloud layer of the capital city. The spires of the High Council rose like needles of glass and steel. "Thrax is hailing us," Morrow said. "She is demanding surrender." "Ignore her," Sable said. "Put me on the public address frequency. Wideband. Broadcast to the entire city. Channel open." Sable stood tall. Her image was projected onto giant screens across the metropolis below. "Citizens of the High Fleet," she roared. "I am Captain Sable Ardent. I bring not war but the truth. The sickness of forgetting the fading of your loved ones is not a plague. It is a signal. And I have brought the answer." She grabbed Rowan's arm and pulled him into the frame. She held up his hand. The mark was blazing like a star bright enough to be seen on the cameras. "The key is here, and he is under my protection. If you want your memories back, you will let us pass." The firing stopped. Down in the city, the soldiers manning the turrets hesitated. They saw the mark. They saw the human standing unafraid beside the captain. And they felt the ache in their own minds, the holes where names and faces used to be. "Hold fire," a voice came over the citywide channel. It was not Thrax. It was an elder matriarch from the council. "Let them land." The Rooklight descended smoke, trailing from its hull, and touched down on the grand plaza of the throne spire. The dust settled. The ramp lowered. Rowan walked out, Pip on his shoulder, Sable at his side. They were surrounded by thousands of guards, hundreds of tanks. But in front of them, standing on the steps of the palace, was Caldera Thrax. She looked furious. "You have made a grave mistake, Ardent," Thrax hissed, her voice amplified by speakers. "You brought the thief to my door." Rowan stepped forward. He raised his glowing hand. "I am not a thief," he said, his voice amplified by the silence of the crowd. "And I am not a pet. I am the guy who is going to turn the lights back on." He pointed his finger at the sky where the faint, swirling nebula of the Lullaby Gate was just visible. "Now," Rowan said. "Who wants to go for a ride?" Thrax signaled her personal guard. "Kill him." The guards raised their weapons. Suddenly, the mark on Rowan's hand pulsed with a shockwave of pure energy. It wasn't an attack. It was a connection. Every weapon in the plaza, with a biometric lock, suddenly clicked and deactivated. "Oops," Rowan grinned, though sweat was pouring down his face. "Did I do that? I told you I am an engineer. I talk to machines. And right now, they like me better than you," the crowd murmured. Thrax looked at her useless weapon. "This is not over," she whispered. "No," Sable said, drawing her shock baton. "It is just beginning." The path to the gate was open. But the war for the soul of the Fenari had just started. The silence that descended upon the grand plaza of the Fenari capital was not the silence of peace. It was the suffocating quiet of a held breath before a scream. The Rooklight sat heavy on the pristine white tiles, its hull scorching the intricate mosaics of the royal court. Archmatron Caldera Thrax did not order a second volley immediately. She was a creature of politics, and she knew that vaporizing a diplomatic vessel in full view of the populace was a desperate move. Instead, she initiated a soft coup, a weapon far more insidious than plasma cannons. Her voice boomed from the public address speakers, echoing off the crystalline spires that pierced the violet sky. "Citizens," Thrax intoned her voice, smooth and dripping with false sorrow. "Do not be deceived by the light. Captain Sable Arden has returned, but she returns corrupted. She has allowed a foreign biological agent to infect her blood. She has bound herself to a human, a primitive resource. She has polluted the high lineage." Inside the bridge of the Rooklight, Sable listened, her hands gripping the command console so tightly that the metal groaned. "She is turning the narrative," Sable said, her voice low and dangerous. "She is framing the link as a disease." "It is effective," Morrow noted, his holographic avatar flickering with anxiety. "I am monitoring the citywide tactical net. Local law enforcement is being overridden. Thrax is deploying her personal Crimson Guard under the guise of sanitation protocols. They are coming to scrub the ship." "Let them come," Chief Rask growled, checking the charge on his heavy repeater. "No," Rowan Mercer said. He was standing by the viewport looking out at the gathering storm of troops. "If we fight a war here, we destroy the city, and we prove her point that we are dangerous." "We are dangerous," Sable snapped, turning to him. We are the only thing standing between these people and the void. As if to punctuate her words, a tremor ran through the ground, shaking the massive ship. It did not come from artillery. It came from the sky. Above them, the faint swirling nebula of the Lullaby Gate pulsed. It was closer now. The wing of the anomaly was beginning to unfurl a curtain of impossible color, bleeding into real space. And with the pulse came the fog. It was not a weather phenomenon. It was a cognitive shadow. On the plaza below, a squad of Thrax's guards paused. One of them, a veteran sergeant, suddenly lowered his rifle. He looked at the soldier next to him, a man he had served with for 20 years, and blinked. "Who are you?" the sergeant asked, his voice picked up by the Rook Light's external sensors. I was supposed to meet someone. A female, with gray fur. My mother." He dropped his weapon, clutching his head. "I cannot remember her face." "It is starting," Rowan whispered, feeling a cold dread settle in his stomach. "The memory wipe. It is hitting the civilians." "Thrax does not care," Sable said. "She will burn the memories of every soul in this city, if it means she gets to sit on the throne of the ashes." "Captain," Morrow interrupted, "the Crimson Guard has breached the outer perimeter. They are not waiting for authorization. They are opening fire." Explosions rocked the hull. The soft coup was over. The hard war had begun. "Rask, hold the ramp," Sable ordered. "Morrow, reroute all auxiliary power to shields. Rowan, stay here. You are the target. I will not lose you to a stray bolt." Rowan looked at her. He saw the fierce protectiveness in her eyes, the desperate need to keep him in a box where he would be safe. It was the same look she gave Pip. "No," Rowan said. Sable paused, already halfway to the armory. "This is not a debate, Mercer. Zar." "You are right," Rowan said, walking over to grab a satchel of tools and a portable interface deck. "It is a war zone, and if you go out there alone, you are just a warrior. You need an engineer." He strapped the gear to his chest. "If you go out there to fight for your people, Sable, I am not staying behind to be a hood ornament. I go where you go." The link flared between them, a hot, stubborn current of agreement. Sable looked at him, really looked at him, and saw that the fragile human she had met 48 hours ago had been replaced by something made of steel and spite. "Stay behind me," she commanded, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "And try not to die. It would be inconvenient paperwork." The battle for the throne corridor was a chaotic, claustrophobic nightmare. The corridors of the royal district were narrow-lined with statues of ancient matriarchs and hanging tapestries that now smoked and burned. Sable moved like a force of nature. She was a blur of motion, her shock baton cracking against armor, her movements fluid and terrifyingly precise. She did not shoot to kill, she fought to dismantle. She fought like a captain reclaiming her crew, not a butcher slaughtering enemies. Rowan moved in her wake. He was not a soldier. He did not have the reflexes or the strength to go toe-to-toe with a Fenari guard, so he fought like a human. When a blast door slammed shut, pinning them down under heavy fire, Sable threw her weight against it, roaring with effort. "It is magnetically sealed," she shouted over the roar of plasma fire. Rowan slid under the suppressing fire, jamming his interface deck into the exposed wiring of a wall panel. "Don't push it, confuse it," he typed furiously, his fingers flying. "I am telling the door sensors that the hallway is on fire, and the oxygen levels are critical. Safety override in 3, 2, 1. The door hissed open. "Move!" Rowan yelled. They pushed forward, but Thrax had prepared the ground. "Sniper tower!" Rask bellowed from the rear guard. "Automated turrets at the end of the hall. We are pinned." 3 heavy automated guns dropped from the ceiling 50 meters ahead, unleashing a wall of energy that chewed up the floor and forced Sable's team behind the pillars. "I cannot get close," Sable shouted, wincing, as a shard of stone grazed her cheek. "If I break cover, I am dead." Rowan looked at the ceiling. He saw the ventilation grates. Small, narrow. Far too small for a 7-foot Fenari warrior in combat armor, but not too small for a human. "Cover me," Rowan said, shedding his heavy tool belt, and keeping only a pair of wire cutters and a data spike. "Rowan, no," Sable hissed, grabbing his arm. "That duct runs directly over the kill zone. If they hear you—" "They won't hear me," Rowan said, his heart hammering against his ribs. "I am soft-footed. And frankly, I am terrified, which makes me very quiet." He looked at her, his blue eyes intense. "Trust the weak guy, Captain. It is what we do." He scrambled up a pile of rubble and pried open the grate. The duct was dark-smelling of dust and ancient grease. Rowan crawled. It was a nightmare of tight spaces. Screws dug into his knees. The metal vibrated with the sound of the gunfire below. He could feel Sable's fear through the link, a cold, clenching knot in his own gut. But he pushed it down. "Just keep moving," he told himself. "Left hand, right knee. Don't sneeze." He reached the access panel above the turrets. He could see through the slats. The guns were firing rhythmically, heat radiating from their barrels. Rowan didn't have a weapon to destroy them. He had to be smarter. He popped the panel and found the targeting processor. He didn't cut the power. That would trigger a fail-safe alarm. Instead, he spliced the friend or foe recognition wire. "Okay," Rowan whispered, sweat dripping into his eyes. "Let us see how you like a pallet swap." He reversed the targeting parameters. Below the turrets, suddenly stopped firing at Sable's position. They spun around their servos, whining, and locked onto the Crimson Guard troops at the far end of the hall. "Target acquired," the automated voice droned. The chaos was instantaneous. The enemy troops scrambled for cover as their own weapons turned on them. "Now!" Rowan shouted into his comms. Sable led the charge, sweeping through the confused defenders. Rowan kicked the grate open and dropped down, landing badly on his ankle, but rolling to his feet. Sable was there, instantly pulling him up. She didn't say a word. She just squeezed his shoulder a touch that said, "I see you," louder than any speech. "The throne room is ahead," Sable said, breathing hard. "Thrax is waiting." The throne room of the Fenari Empire was a cavernous hall of gold and obsidian designed to make anyone standing in it feel small. At the far end, beneath the great arch, stood Caldera Thrax. But she was not alone. The room was lined with her elite guards, weapons leveled. And in the center of the dais, encased in a shimmering force field cage, was Pip. The kit was huddled in the corner of the cage, his eyes squeezed shut, shaking violently. "Pip!" Sable cried out, stepping forward. "Hold!" Thrax commanded. She held a remote detonator in her hand. "The field is unstable. One step closer, Captain, and the child becomes vapor." Sable froze. Her entire body went rigid. The rage radiating from her was hot enough to blister paint, but she held it in check. "You are a coward, Caldera," Sable spat. "Using a child, a kid of the creche." "I am a pragmatist," Thrax replied, coolly. She descended the steps, her gaze fixing on Rowan. "I do not want the child. I want the key, and I want the authority." She gestured to the empty throne. "This is a hearing," Thrax announced. She waved her hand, and hidden cameras drone floated down from the ceiling. "We are broadcasting to the Council. The charge is treason. The evidence is the pollution standing beside you." Thrax pointed a claw at Rowan. "Give me the human," Thrax said. "Let our scientists extract the biological anomaly from his blood. It will kill him, of course, but you will save the child, and you will save your reputation." She smiled, a cruel, thin expression. "Choose Ardent, the pet you bonded with in a moment of weakness, or the future of our species." It was the impossible choice, the classic villain's gambit, Sable looked at Pip, who was whimpering in the cage. Then she looked at Rowan. The link screamed in her mind. It wasn't just affection anymore. It was a part of her soul. To give him up was to tear out her own heart. "But to let Pip die, you cannot ask me this," Sable whispered, her voice breaking. "I just did," Thrax said. 5 seconds. "Stop," Rowan said. He stepped out from behind Sable. He walked past her, ignoring her hand, reaching out to grab him. "Rowan, no!" Sable shouted. Rowan kept walking until he stood 10 feet from Thrax. He looked small, bruised, and dirty. His flight suit was torn, his face smeared with grease. But he held his head high. "Let the kid go," Rowan said. "You want the key here." He held up his hand. The mark was pulsing wildly now, reacting to the proximity of the gate overhead. "I am the one you want," Rowan said. "Unlock the cage, I surrender." "Rowan," Sable's voice was a raw wound. "Do not do this. She will kill you." Rowan looked back at her. He smiled, a sad, crooked smile. "I know, but you are a Captain Sable. You have to save the crew. I am just the engineer." He looked at Thrax. "Open the cage. I will walk to you." Thrax's eyes gleamed with triumph. She tapped the remote. The force field around Pip flickered and died. "Come here, soft skin," Thrax purred. Rowan took a step, and then chaos erupted. Pip did not run to Sable. The moment the field dropped, the kit's eyes snapped open. He saw Rowan offering himself. He saw the threat. And he saw Thrax. Pip launched himself like a furry missile. He did not aim for Thrax's legs. He aimed high. He leaped, propelled by the enhanced musculature of his species, and clamped his jaws onto Thrax's wrist, the hand holding the detonator. "Arg!" Thrax shrieked, dropping the device. She thrashed, trying to shake the kid off, but Pip's locking mechanism was engaged. He bit down hard. Thrax, in a blind panic, struck the child, her claws raking across Pip's back. Blood sprayed, and then Thrax's blood, dripping from the bite wound, splattered onto the floor. It mixed with the blood dripping from Rowan's hand, which he had reopened in the struggle. The two bloods touched. The effect was cataclysmic. The mark on Rowan's hand did not just glow, it screamed. A shockwave of crimson and gold energy blasted outward from the point of contact. The throne room's AI system, which monitored the biological vitals of everyone in the court, suddenly went haywire. "Anomaly detected." The room's voice boomed louder than thunder. "Violation of Guardian protocols. Royal blood spilled by royal blood. Intervention required." Every light in the room turned a deep warning amber. The automated defense turrets that Thrax controlled spun around, locking onto Thrax. "What is this?" Thrax screamed, clutching her bleeding wrist as Pip scrambled away to Rowan. "My codes are absolute." Sable stepped forward. She saw what had happened. She saw the legal loophole that only a biological society could have. "The Guardian's choice," Sable shouted, her voice ringing with authority. "It is the old law, Thrax. You forgot the history." She pointed at Pip, who was shivering in Rowan's arms. "The kit chose a protector by spilling the blood of the protector, and by harming the kit you have violated the sanctity of the creche. The system no longer recognizes you as Archmatron. It recognizes you as a predator." "Lies," Thrax yelled. "Kill them. Kill them all." But her guards hesitated. The room was judging her. The very building was rejecting her command codes. Suddenly, the heavy doors behind the throne groaned open. A figure walked in. She was old, incredibly old. Her fur was entirely white, and she walked with a cane made of meteoric iron. She was accompanied by 4 silent sisters, the keepers of the law. It was Matriarch Veda, the oldest living member of the council. "Cease," Veda said. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of a collapsing star. The room froze. Even Thrax went silent. Veda walked slowly down the stairs. She looked at Thrax, then at Sable, and finally at Rowan and Pip. The human bleeds for the child, Veda said, looking at Rowan. The Archmatron bleeds the child. The machine has judged. She turned to Thrax. Your command is suspended Caldera. This requires a tribunal. There is no time for a tribunal, Thrax screeched, pointing at the ceiling. Look. Above them, the ceiling of the throne room, which was a massive view screen, showed the sky. The lullaby gate was opening. It wasn't just a rift anymore. A massive crystalline structure was pushing its way into reality. It looked like a flower made of shattered glass, spanning thousands of kilometers. And as it opened, the wave hit them. It was a physical force. Rowan fell to his knees, clutching his head. In the room, guards dropped their weapons. Matriarch Veda swayed her eyes, going wide. My name, Veda whispered. What is my name? Thrax stared at her hands. I ordered something. What did I order? The amnesia was instant and total. The gate was wiping the slate clean. Sable staggered, grabbing Rowan's shoulder to stay upright. She felt her own memories slipping, her childhood, her training, her rank. They were dissolving like sugar in hot water. But then, she felt the link. It was an anchor. Rowan's mind was holding on to hers. And Rowan was holding on to the mark. Rowan, Sable gasped. I am forgetting. Focus on me, Rowan gritted out through clenched teeth. Focus on the pain. Focus on the annoying human. Rowan looked at the confusion in the room. Thrax was useless. The matriarch was lost. The guards were wandering aimlessly. The gate, Rowan gasped. It is not attacking. It is waiting. It is waiting for the key. We have to go, Sable said clarity, returning only because of the physical contact with him. If we stay here, we become empty shells. We cannot go back to the ship, Rowan said. We will never make it through the city. We are not going through the city, Sable said. She looked at the skylight. She looked at the rook light parked on the plaza. She grabbed her communicator. Morrow, are you there? I am experiencing significant data corruption, the AI's voice stuttered. Who is this? It is your captain, Sable shouted. Override safety protocols. Remote pilot the rook light to my coordinates. Hover mode. Now. Complying, outside the massive cruiser, lifted off the plaza. It drifted toward the open roof of the throne room. We are leaving, Sable told the room of confused amnesiac soldiers. She grabbed Rowan and Pip. Rask, who had been guarding the door, looked at them with blank eyes. Where are we going? To the source, Sable said. Rask. You know me, grab onto the line. The rook light lowered a cargo winch through the shattered skylight. Sable clipped herself and Rowan onto the cable. Rask, acting on muscle memory alone, grabbed the line. Thrax, Sable shouted at the confused Archmatron. You wanted to rule this graveyard. The winch retracted, pulling them up into the belly of the ship. As they ascended, Rowan looked down. He saw the city of the Fenari falling into chaos. Vehicles crashed. People stood in the streets looking at their hands, wondering who they were. It is a massacre of the mind, Rowan whispered. They hit the airlock. Sable dragged them inside. Bridge, she yelled, sprinting down the corridor. Get us out of the atmosphere. They burst onto the bridge. The crew was in disarray. Half of them were staring at the screens, drooling. Sable jumped into the pilot's seat herself. She shoved the confused helmsman aside. Rowan, she shouted, put your hand on the nav computer. Why? Because you are the only one who knows where we are going. The gate is calling you. Rowan slammed his glowing hand onto the black glass of the console. The ship shuddered. The mark interfaced with the drive core. The coordinates locked in. Holding on, Sable yelled. She slammed the throttle forward. The rook light did not turn away from the anomaly. It turned toward it. With a roar that shook the bones of everyone on board, the cruiser shot straight up, piercing the violet sky, heading directly into the maw of the lullaby gate. We go to the source, Sable whispered, her hand finding Rowan's on the console. Or we lose everything. The world outside the viewport turned white, and then there was silence. The Lullaby Gate was not a physical structure, not in the way a mountain or a space station was. It was a wound in the fabric of the universe that had decided to sing. As the Rook light plunged toward the center of the anomaly, the viewports ceased to show stars. Instead, they showed ribbons of iridescent light, violent violets bruising blues, and a gold that hurt to look at. The ship shuddered, not from atmospheric turbulence, but because gravity itself was rippling like water in a disturbed pond. On the bridge, the silence was terrifying. It was the silence of minds emptying out. Rowan Mercer stood at the helm, his hands locked onto the manual controls. He was steering by instinct and by the burning map etched into his own nervous system. Beside him, Captain Sable Ardent was gripping the console, her knuckles white. "Bearing," Sable whispered. Her voice was brittle like dry leaves. "What is our bearing?" "Straight down the throat," Rowan replied. His teeth were chattering, but he forced the words out. "Hold on, Sable, just hold on." "I am trying," she said. She turned to look at him, and for a second her golden eyes were vacant. "Who are you talking to?" Rowan's heart stopped. He reached out and grabbed her arm, digging his fingers into the dense muscle of her forearm. He squeezed hard. "I am Rowan," he said, his voice fierce. "I am the annoyance you picked up at Gleam Harbor. I am the one with the fragile bones. Look at me." Sable blinked. The physical pain of his grip combined with the proximity of the mark jolted her back to the present. She gasped, air rushing into her lungs, as if she had been drowning. "Rowan," she breathed, the recognition flooding back with a wash of shame. "I slipped. It felt like sand. My name felt like sand." "It is okay," Rowan said, though he was terrified. "Just use me as the anchor. I have the map. As long as you are touching me, you know where you are." Around them, the bridge crew was succumbing. The helmsman had simply let go of the wheel, staring at his hands with childlike wonder. The tactical officer was curled in her chair, weeping silently, for a mother she could no longer name. "They are lost," Sable whispered, looking at her crew. "My people. They are hollow." "Not lost," Rowan corrected. Paused. "We are going to hit the play button again." He looked at the swirling vortex ahead. It was deafening now, a song that vibrated in the marrow of his bones. It was a lullaby, sweet and terrible, urging them to sleep, to let go of the burden of identity. "Sable," Rowan said, shouting over the psychic noise. "If I go under, if I lose it in the next few minutes, you have to promise me something." "What?" she asked, gripping his hand so tight he felt his metacarpals grinding. Rowan managed a weak, crooked grin. "If I forget everything, I hope I still remember you frowning at me. It is a very stabilizing frown. It makes me feel like I need to work harder." Sable stared at him. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over onto her fur. And then she laughed. It was a broken, jagged sound, but it was real. "You are impossible," she choked out. "You are facing oblivion, and you are making jokes." "It is how we survive," Rowan said softly. "We laugh at the dark until it gets embarrassed and leaves." Suddenly, the mark on Rowan's hand flared with a blinding white intensity. A beam of light shot from his palm, piercing the view screen and striking the center of the vortex. The Lullaby Gate responded. The chaotic swirling stopped. The ribbons of light snapped into a geometric precision, forming a tunnel. A path. "It is open," Rowan said. "It recognizes the key." "Captain." The voice of Morrow broke through the static. The AI sounded glitchy, his sentences fragmenting. "Rear sensors pursuit. Thrax." Rowan looked at the tactical display. A sleek, heavy interceptor was tearing through the cloud behind them. It was Thrax's personal yacht, weaponized and shielded. "She followed us," Sable growled. The sight of the enemy sharpened her mind, pushing back the fog. She wants to claim the discovery. Thrax's voice crackled over the open comms, distorted by the gravitational waves. You will not take my legacy. The interceptor fired a spread of torpedoes. Brace! Sable shouted, throwing herself over Pip, who was strapped into the navigator's chair. But the impact never came. As the torpedoes raced toward the Rooklight, the gate itself reacted. The tunnel walls rippled. A shimmering, translucent barrier materialized between the Rooklight and the pursuer. The torpedoes struck the barrier and dissolved, not exploding, but simply ceasing to exist, turned into harmless dust. The gate, Rowan realized, watching the sensors. It is protecting us. Why? Sable asked. Because we have the passcode, Rowan said, looking at his hand, then at Sable, then at Pip. And she does not. The Rooklight passed through the final membrane of the anomaly. The screaming noise vanished. The vibration stopped. They were inside. The core of the Lullaby Gate was not a machine. It was a garden. The ship drifted into a vast spherical space that defied physics. Floating islands of crystalline structures drifted in a void of soft white light. It was silent, peaceful, and terrifyingly sterile. Rowan brought the ship to a hover. Near the largest structure, a platform that looked like a giant sleeping flower made of glass. We have to go out there, Rowan said. He could feel the pull in his chest, a magnetic hook dragging him toward the platform. The atmosphere is breathable, Morrow announced, his voice. Suddenly crystal clear, the glitch is gone. In fact, the air is optimized. It is perfect. Sable, Rowan, and Pip walked down the ramp of the Rooklight. The silence of the core was heavy, like a cathedral. They stepped onto the glass platform. It felt warm under their boots. Where are we? Sable whispered, her hand resting on her shock baton. The delivery room, a voice said. It was not Sable. It was not Rowan. Rowan froze. He looked down. Pip was standing between them. The kit was not looking at them. He was looking up at the spire of light in the center of the platform. His posture had changed. He was no longer hunched or scurrying. He stood perfectly upright, his stillness unnatural. Pip, Rowan asked tentatively. When the kit turned to look at them, his eyes were not the frightened brown of a child. They were glowing with the same white light as the gate. This unit is designated Pip, the child said. The voice was wrong. It was Pip's vocal cords, but the cadence was ancient, layered and devoid of fear. But I am merely the interface. Welcome to the cradle. Sable drew her weapon, stepping in front of Rowan. What have you done to the child? I am the child, the entity. Speaking through, Pip replied calmly. And I am the gate. And I am the sorrow you felt. Rowan put a hand on Sable's shoulder, lowering her weapon. Wait. It is not possessing him. It is him. Correct, Engineer Mercer, Pip, or the Cradle, said. This biological vessel was constructed 19 standard months ago. It was released into the Fenari population as a variable. A test. A test, Sable demanded. He is a living being. We found him crying in a refugee camp. The distress was programmed, the Cradle said. The vulnerability was a lure. I needed to find a pair, a guardian and a catalyst. The small fox child pointed a claw at Sable, then at Rowan. The Fenari are stagnant, the Cradle intoned. Your species values strength over connection. You isolate, you war, you are dying a slow death of genetic and cultural entropy. And the humans, you are chaotic fragile, but you possess an unlimited capacity for bonding. You pack bond with anything, even a rock, even a predator. Rowan felt a chill go down his spine. You engineered this, the bite. The inoculation, the Cradle corrected. The bite transferred the dormant key code into your bloodstream, Rowan Mercer. But a key is useless without a hand to turn it. That is why the protocol required the Fenari biological response. The lick, the healing instinct. It was the only way to merge the code with the host. Sable felt sick. So it was all a lie. The connection, the feelings. It was just you manipulating biology to open a door. The translation error, Rowan realized suddenly. He looked at the entity. On the exchange deck. I didn't say cute butt. I know I didn't. I was tired, but I know my syntax. The cradle nodded slowly. I influenced the probability of the translation matrix. A 1 in a billion glitch. I needed a public declaration of mating intent. Without it, the Fenari High Command would have separated you immediately after the incident. By framing it as a ritual challenge, I forced your social laws to protect the bond long enough for it to stabilize. Sable staggered back. She looked at Rowan, horror dawning on her face. We are puppets. Everything we felt, the trust, the heat, it was just a program running in our blood. She looked at her hands. I did not choose you. I was programmed to keep you. The silence that followed was heartbreaking. Rowan saw the light die in Sable's eyes. She was a warrior who prized honor and agency above all else. To be told she was a tool was a fate worse than death. Rowan stepped forward. He knelt down in front of the glowing child. No, Rowan said firmly. The cradle tilted its head. The data is conclusive. The data is garbage, Rowan said. He stood up and turned to Sable. He grabbed her hands. She tried to pull away, but he held fast. Sable, listen to me. The machine might have set up the board, it might have dealt the cards. But it didn't play the hand. We did. Rowan, it controlled the translation. It controlled the bite. Did it control the night in the cabin? Rowan asked, his voice rising. Did it control you crying because you were scared for the kid? Did it control me standing up to Rask? Did it control the joke I just made on the bridge? He pressed her hand against his chest, right over his heart. The biology was the spark, but the fire was us. You could have let them shoot me 100 times. You could have handed me over to Thrax. The machine gave you an urge, but you made the choice. Sable looked at him. She felt the link humming in her blood. It wasn't cold code, it was warm, it was messy, it was human. She looked back at the glowing entity. Her eyes narrowed. He is right, Sable, said her voice, turning to steel. You can make a body machine. You can make a lock. But you cannot code loyalty. Loyalty is a variable of survival, the cradle stated. I created the sorrow drift, the memory loss, to force a crisis, to force your species to seek the cure, to seek union. It is salvation by necessity. It is kidnapping, Rowan shouted. You are holding the memories of billions of people hostage just to force us to get along. That is not a peace treaty. That is a shotgun wedding. It is efficient, the cradle replied. The galaxy is fractured. I am the glue. We do not want to be glued, Sable said, stepping up beside Rowan. We want to be woven. There is a difference. She raised her glowing hand entwined with Rowan's. We are the key, right? Sable asked. The Guardian and the Catalyst. That means we control the system. You are the interface, the cradle acknowledged. You may initiate the integration protocol. This will permanently merge your species' territories and enforce the link on a population level. No, Rowan said. We are not enforcing anything. We are rewriting the terms of service, Sable added. Rowan looked at the glowing spire. Can we interface with the core directly? The biological link allows for administrative access, the cradle said, sounding almost confused. What are you attempting? Rowan grinned. It was a dangerous engineer's grin. I am going to patch your firmware. No more sorrow drift. No more memory wiping. You are going to give everyone their lives back. If I cease the drift, the motivation for unity dissipates, the cradle argued. Conflict will return. Let it, Sable said. Better a free conflict than a forced peace. We will build the unity ourselves, the hard way, the real way. We are keeping the gate open, Rowan added, but as a bridge, not a trap. Anyone can cross, but nobody has to. Rowan and Sable placed their joined hands onto the spire of light. The sensation was overwhelming. They were suddenly everywhere. They saw the memories of the sailors on the Rooklight. They saw the mother in the city forgetting her child. They saw the vast, terrifying tapestry of the Cradle's plan. And they pushed back. They pushed with the stubbornness of a human dandelion. They pushed with the fierce pride of a Fenari captain. Accessing core logic, overriding mandate. Coercion, new mandate, consensus. The white light of the core began to shift. It turned gold warm, vibrant and alive. System alteration in progress, the Cradle said. The voice of the entity was fading, replaced by the softer, more natural tone of a child. The drift is reversing. Memories are restoring. Suddenly, a blast of energy struck the platform. Sable and Rowan were thrown back, their connection to the spire severed for a second. Caldera Thrax stood at the edge of the platform. She had breached the shield. Her armor was scorched, her face a mask of madness. She held a heavy plasma cannon, torn from the wreckage of her own ship. "You will not," Thrax screamed. "You will not give this power to the rabble. It belongs to the High Blood." She aimed the cannon at Pip, who was standing defenseless, as the entity retreated from his mind. "If I cannot rule it," Thrax shrieked, "I will break the key." Sable moved. She didn't use her shock baton. She didn't use a gun. She moved with the speed of a mother and the brutality of a warlord. She tackled Thrax just as the cannon fired. The blast went wide, shattering a crystalline tree. They rolled across the glass floor. Thrax was stronger, fueled by hysteria. She clawed at Sable's face, screaming about bloodlines and purity. Sable took the hit. She let Thrax strike her, absorbing the blow on her armored shoulder. And then she used the move Rowan had used on Rask. She didn't overpower. She yielded. As Thrax lunged for a killing blow, Sable dropped her weight and swept Thrax's leg. The Archmatron fell hard. Before she could rise, Sable was on top of her, her hand gripping Thrax's throat, not to crush but to pin. "It is over, Caldera," Sable hissed. "Kill me," Thrax spat. "Finish it, prove you are a Fenari." Sable looked down at her. She raised her free hand, claws extended. The execution would be legal. It would be justified. But then she heard Rowan. "Sable." She froze. She looked up. Rowan was holding Pip. He wasn't telling her to stop. He was just watching her, trusting her. Sable looked back at Thrax. "No," Sable said. She retracted her claws. "I am not your weapon, and I am not the Cradle's tool. I am Captain Ardent, and you are under arrest." She stood up, hauling Thrax with her. She stripped the Archmatron of her rank insignia and shoved her toward the waiting security drones of the gate, which were now obeying the new consensus protocols. "Take her," Sable ordered. "She can face the tribunal, and she can live with the shame of knowing she lost to a soft skin and a traitor." Thrax screamed in impotent rage as the drones restrained her. Rowan walked over to the spire. The light was stable now. "Did we do it?" Rowan asked. Sable walked over to him. She looked at the gate, then at her crew, who were beginning to stir on the ship, waking up from the nightmare. "We did," she said. Pip looked up at them. The glowing eyes were gone. They were just brown again. "Rowan," Pip asked, his voice small and trembling. "I had a weird dream. I was a building." Rowan laughed, tears streaming down his face. He picked the boy up. "Yeah, kid, it was a weird dream. But we are awake now." The gate pulsed one last time. Not a wave of forgetting, but a wave of remembering. Across the sector, names returned. Faces returned. The holes in the heart of the galaxy were filled. Epilogue. 6 months later, the planet of Oakhaven was a border world. A lush, untamed place where Terran settlements and Fenari outposts mixed in a chaotic, vibrant sprawl. On a hill overlooking the spaceport, a house sat. It was a strange piece of architecture, half sturdy, Terran brick, half elegant Fenari glass. In the garden, Rowan Mercer was trying to fix a moisture evaporator. He was covered in grease, swearing softly. "You are doing it wrong," a voice called out. Sable Ardent leaned against the doorframe. She was not wearing her armor. She wore a loose linen shirt and trousers, her fur gleaming in the sunlight. She looked relaxed, younger than she had ever looked on the Rooklight. "I am applying percussive maintenance," Rowan argued, hitting the machine with a wrench. "It is a culturally significant human technique." "It is breaking the valve," Sable noted, walking over. She took the wrench from him and turned the bolt effortlessly. The machine hummed to life. "Show off," Rowan grumbled. "I am merely efficient," Sable smirked. A streak of gray fur shot past them. Pip was chasing a drone, laughing hysterically. He had grown. He was lanky now, full of energy, and entirely wonderfully normal. "He has school tomorrow," Rowan said, wiping his hands on a rag. "The principal called. Said he bit a kid." Sable sighed. "Aggression. No," Rowan smiled. "Defense. A bully was picking on a smaller kid." Pip intervened. Apparently he gave a very eloquent speech about guardian protocols before nipping the bully on the ankle. "That is my boy," Sable said, a swell of pride in her voice. "Our boy," Rowan corrected. Sable looked at him. The link was settled now. It wasn't a roaring fire anymore. It was the warm embers of a hearth. Constant, comforting. She could feel his amusement, his love, and his perpetual mild back pain. "Come inside," Sable said. "I made dinner. It is Terran food. I believe you call it meatloaf, though it looks more like a brick." Rowan laughed. "I love bricks." They walked inside. The house was messy. There were toys on the floor, datapads on the table, and a general sense of lived-in chaos. Later that night, in the quiet of their bedroom, the windows were open to the night air. Rowan sat on the edge of the bed. Sable was brushing her fur, a ritual she performed with meticulous care. Rowan watched her. He looked at the uniform hanging in the closet. She was still, a captain commanding the Rooklight on diplomatic missions, but this place was the command center. "You know," Rowan said softly. "I have been thinking." "Dangerous," Sable murmured, putting down the brush. "About that day on the exchange deck," Rowan continued, "when I slipped." Sable turned to him. Her eyes danced with amusement. "When you propositioned me in front of 2 armies. I still maintain," Rowan said, crawling across the bed to sit next to her, "that it was a translation error. But," he took her hand. He ran his thumb over her knuckles. "If I could go back to that exact moment with all the guns pointed at me and the scary fox lady staring me down—" "Yes," Sable leaned in closer. "I would still say it," Rowan whispered. "Because honestly, I wasn't wrong. It was cute." Sable threw her head back and laughed, a rich, full sound that filled the room. "You are an idiot, Rowan Mercer." "I am your idiot," he countered. From the hallway, there was a soft patter of feet. Pip stood in the doorway, clutching a stuffed toy that looked vaguely like a distorted starship. "Nightmare?" Sable asked, her voice instantly shifting to the soft maternal tone that still surprised her. Pip nodded. "The building dream again." "Come here," Rowan said, patting the space between them. Pip scrambled up, burrowing under the covers between his parents. "You are safe," Sable whispered, curling her tail around the boy's feet. "The building is gone. Only the house is left." Rowan held up his hand. The mark was faint now, a pale white scar that only glowed when emotions ran high. Pip looked at the finger. He looked at Rowan. A mischievous glint entered the child's eyes. He reached out and gently, very gently bit the tip of Rowan's finger. "Hey!" Rowan feigned outrage. "We talked about this, no eating the parents." Sable smiled. She reached out and took Rowan's hand. She brought the bitten finger to her lips. But this time there was no biological imperative. There was no rush of ancient code. There was no force. She kissed the finger. softly, deliberately. Healed, she whispered against his skin. Rowan looked at her, and the love he felt through the link was finally perfectly silent. Yeah, Rowan said, pulling his family close. Healed. Outside, the stars shone down on the border world, silent